This is what it's all about. Welcome to sunrise over the Simpson Desert. This is a vast part of the Australian landscape. We're up at the crack of dawn because we want to hit the trail as quickly as we can to get over some of those thousands of dunes that you can see behind me. Join us as we take you across the Simpson Desert.
In this video of our 5-part series, we will continue to take on the sand dunes of the Simpson Desert and we'll be putting the LandCruiser 300 series to the test. We're going to show you what to do when things go wrong, and we'll give you some tips on camping in this remote part of the world. We are crossing the Simpson Desert from west to east, travelling on the shortest and most direct route available. This is known as the French line, but it also includes the K1 and QAA lines. We're covering just over 500 kilometres between refuelling opportunities in Mount Dare and Birdsville. There is a handful of alternative tracks you can take towards the south of our route, and that includes options like the Rig Road, the WAA line and the Knolls track. And if you've got the right car and enough time, you can also consider upping the ante and taking on the more challenging Madigan line. This runs in a crescent shape through the northern part of the desert, and it takes a lot longer to do. Two other options include the Colson track and the Hay River track. They go against the grain in a more north-south direction.
One of the most interesting parts of this drive for me is the changing nature of the desert landscape, and that means that the land that you're driving on is changing underneath your tyres while you're driving on it. So because we're heading from west to east, we started in Mount Dare, we're heading over to Birdsville, the dunes are getting very different the further east we go. They were a lot closer together to start with, they were lower and they were shorter, so cresting them was a very quick exercise. But as you get further and further east, they change completely. They're a lot taller. They're spread out further. They have double layers across the top. Sometimes there's flat sections and then you come down the other side. So what that means is you start to get to the part of the drive where it's a little bit more challenging for both vehicle and for the driver. Of course, as we keep saying, preparation is key, but so is the way that you handle the wheel and you drive the vehicle that you're in. We're in the 300 series LandCruiser, and to be completely honest with you, even the most challenging parts of this more difficult section have been very, very easy for this vehicle. It's done it incredibly easily without even raising a sweat.
Finding a nice campsite in the desert amongst all the dunes isn't too challenging. There are flat and obvious clearings available every once in a while, and some of them are big enough to fit in large groups or even charge up your Tesla. Lol. And while it might seem tempting to drive off into the bush for some extra seclusion, you do need to camp within 100 metres of the main track. But of course you'd be well served to find a campsite nice and early in the day so you can enjoy this unique landscape before the sun goes down.
While Chef Purcell prepares our dinner, let me run you through a couple of factors of our campsite. We've got our camp chairs there. They always need to be near the fire. Those front runner fold-out seats, they're about 15 to 20 years old. They've been around for ages. Sam's brought some Helinox seats. This is my sleeping setup, which Sam refers to as the Taj Mahal, and you will in a moment understand why. What I'm doing at the moment, and this is the first time I've tried this setup out, I've got an ARB swag, but this can be any brand of swag, doesn't matter. I've got an ARB Touring. I think they call this a Sky Dome, and I've got it on the ARB stretcher. So having been someone who previously always had his swag sitting on the ground, I decided to try a stretcher on this trip. It's been good. Funnily enough, it's been dry this whole trip while we've been camping, so it hasn't mattered too much that it's up off the ground. But if you like the idea of being in a swag up off the ground, have a look at that system there, or anyone that offers you a stretcher, because then you can get yourself up. Now, this is why Sam calls mine the Taj Mahal. I cannot look at this swag without laughing. I've started calling it the death bag because it looks like the kind of thing that you would carry a body around in. What brand is it, Sam? Saul Swag. And this is the point. This is a very, very high quality swag. So this is the traditional way of doing swags. And I joke about how Sam sleeps in it, but there's basically a flap that comes up, you get inside it and pull the flap over when you're ready to go to sleep. This one's a Saul Swag, as Sam said, high quality canvas made in Australia, very, very interesting, and it's a good product too. I've got one of my crash pad mats down here for one of our cruise swags. So basically that's just a canvas mat. We threw that in case we had a flat tire, had to crawl around in the dirt. It doubles really well to go underneath the swag. On top of that, we've got a Dune 4-wheel drive Outback XL swag. So this is kind of like a modern style swag, bows at each end, ropes to pull them out tight. Getting it on a mat is really important too, because if there's condensation or if the ground's damp and you get a bit of dew that settles and it comes up through the dirt, better to have it up off the ground. So that's another option there as well. And then lastly, we've got another Australian made swag. This is a Mr. Swagman swag. These are designed and made in Australia, really high quality canvas. Once again, this is basically the setup that I used to go with. So I'd put a tarp down, swag on top, sleeping bag inside. All of these swags basically have got 70 millimeter, they call it egg crate foam mattresses. So they're really comfortable whether you're on the ground or you're up in the air. This is the setup I used to use. Tarp on the ground again to sort of keep it dry underneath, roll the swag out and away you go. It's a really interesting thing the way people choose to camp. Everybody's different. You might want to sleep on the ground, you might want to be up off the ground. Whatever works for you, make it happen.
Another good tip is to pick up firewood along the track rather than waiting until you get to camp. It is a precious resource out here in the desert, so try not to burn everything in sight on the first night. Keep a little modest fire going, save some wood for the next night or even the next traveller if possible. And try your hand at cooking over the fire while you're at it. I find food always tastes better this way, even if you burn it, and it just adds so much to the experience. Morning of day 3, I think, in the desert. The days do start to blend into one out here a little bit as you start driving eastward further towards Birdsville. We pulled into camp here last night and this worked out to be a pretty nice place to watch the sun come up this morning. It's a bit of a grove and a nice big flat area, and it makes you realize that although the desert is fairly repetitive, you've got 1100 sand dunes to drive over, for example, there is a bit of variety to be had. Beforehand, we camped under the lee of a dune, and that was handy because it was a little bit of wind getting around, and so that gave us a bit of protection. We didn't have that problem tonight, so this worked out really well. We picked up a little bit of firewood along the way, had a nice fire, cooked over the coals. It was a really, really nice night, and it did get pretty chilly. I think some of the guys were saying that it might have been the coldest night so far, so don't forget to pack a very cold doona. And I think today things are going to change a little bit more once again. We're getting into some of the salt pan country a little bit further on. There is Lake Popple there, the corner of the 3 states, which is always a good place to visit. And I'm hoping that there's not going to be too much mud in those clay pans because they can be quite treacherous, but we'll see how we go. So the LandCruiser 70 series is in a little spot of bother at the moment. I have to say that conditions in the desert at the moment are really good. The sand, if you pick it up and feel it, it's quite firm. It's a little bit wet and damp actually, and it makes driving a lot easier. So we have kind of gone to a little bit of effort to get this car stuck at the moment to show you a few things. But if conditions were harder and you are fully laden with all the kind of gear that you need for your own Simpson Desert crossing, chances are you will come into a situation like this once or twice while you're going across the desert. So it brings us to the question of what do you do when you get stuck? So here are my tips. Number 1, don't stress. Everything's fine. Don't sit there and mash the pedal going forward and reverse and stressing and worrying. The first thing I would do, stop the car, put it in gear, put on the handbrake, hop out and have a look and just see what's going on. So here we can see that the rears have dug in a little bit and it's starting to sit actually a little bit on the leaf springs there and starting to get on the chassis rails as well. That's stopping it from going forward. So we do need a little bit of help to see what's going on here. Because this sand is so firm, there's a pretty good chance actually that we could reverse out of this with a little bit of digging or something like that. And that would probably be the best way to go forward. Something like a shovel or some max tracks. Get down there, just dig the stuff away and you should get moving reasonably easily. And situations like this is why you would recommend people to not tow trailers across the desert if they can help it, because going backwards is of course a bit of a trickier situation when you've got something behind you. So let's get stuck into it. I've got some max tracks up on the roof there. I'm going to get those down and see how they go. So it's a bit of dirty work, and let's be honest, I've been in the car for about 3 days straight, so I don't mind the exercise of actually getting down here and digging. Use a shovel, use the other side of the Max Tracks. You can get other brands of these as well. These are kind of the original style, and I do like these ones. They've been quite a quality unit for us. But you can also just use your hands. This is soft sand at the end of the day. Get in there and clear a path for the wheels to get up. And then you get your Max Tracks, whatever board you might have, you wedge them in there as far as you can. So they're gonna act like a bridge. These little teeth should grip onto the wheels, lift the car up and out of the bog, and you can drive out. That at least is the theory. Let's see if it works in practice. In the driver's seat now, I'm in low range. I haven't put the diff locks on because I want to see if these Max Tracks actually work. Everyone's out of the way. I've got a clear path in front of me. Time to apply a little bit of throttle, see what happens. And of course, when it rains, it pours. After we got the 79 series bogged a little bit on purpose, we managed to accidentally get the 300 series stuck on the crest of a dune, but no problem. We had the Max Tracks out, we did a little bit of digging, and we were able to reverse out nice and easy. Here are a few tips to remember when getting bogged yourself. The main one for me is, of course, tyre pressures. If your vehicle feels like it's working too hard and it keeps getting stuck, it's probably just trying to tell you that your pressures are still a little bit too high. Consider taking a little bit more out. You might worry about getting stuck out here, and yeah, pretty good reason, but if you've got enough gear and a little bit of knowledge, it's just part of the adventure and it's part of the fun. And with all of that bogging behind us, we continued eastward towards Birdsville, watching the dunes get bigger and bigger, and seeing the clay pans of this part of the desert start to roll out in front of us. If you're worried that something like this trip would be a bit repetitive and very boring, I'd have to say you would be incorrect. Yes, there is a lot of the same out here, but experiencing this part of Australia, something so remote and something that so few will ever see firsthand, it is a deeply rewarding and satisfying experience. I'm going to be really selfish here. I think if we get enough likes and subscriptions on this video, they might let us go out and do it all over again. So please hit that thumbs up for us and follow our channel on YouTube. And of course, head over to Drive.com.au for the full story. And stay tuned for the final episode of our 5-part series where we finally take on the big challenge of the Simpson Desert. That is Napa Nerica, or otherwise known as Big Red. And we will give our final verdict on the performance of this LandCruiser 300 series.